have to say, no matter what has been said about Dragon Age Veilguard, I have always been slightly hyped about it. I can't help myself. I've been a fan of the Dragon Age series for over 20 years. To hear some of the contents and some of the news stories surrounding the Dragon Age Veilguard, I've been apprehensive but still slightly optimistic in this brand, because Dragon Age Origins, I've played it multiple times. Even Dragon Age 2, I played multiple times. I know people were mad at that game for having reused assets and not being as broad as Dragon Age Origins, but I love that game. And I love Dragon Age Inquisition as well. Even though that game was a slight downgrade from the past 2 games that came out, I still enjoyed that game, so I was still hyped for Dragon Age Veilguard. But as I see this trailer, as I see the new character designs, and as I hear new stories about the people developing this game, my apprehension has grown into full-blown skepticism. And I think that's the situation a lot of people are having with this Dragon Age game, as we see some of the character designs, some of the action pieces, some of the overall gameplay features that they're showing us. They're making a game not made for Dragon Age fans anymore. It's made for a new age, modern audience of gamers that actually don't want to play games and maybe are uninterested in the original story of the Dragon Age series as a whole. Of course, this wouldn't be new for BioWare, because BioWare of the old has been long since dead, so it makes sense that we're not getting the same game that we got beforehand 10 years ago with Dragon Age Inquisition. We're getting something completely and entirely different, and I'm sad to say that this game might be the last Dragon Age game forever, because it may be the Dragon Age game that ends the series, because it's just not as great as the past iterations of this game. But what am I talking about? Of course, mainly for me, I'm talking about the character designs. Looking at some of the characters, specifically Morrigan, seeing her design, it made me realize that this was being made by people that don't like the aesthetics of the old Dragon Age game, or just the look of the characters that we saw beforehand. I know people are going to say, no, the characters look good. What are you talking about? This is the standard characters that we saw in past iterations of Dragon Age. But if you look at some of the models, specifically of Dragon Age Inquisition, where I think we got the best designs of characters, you realize this is a complete downgrade from what we've been getting in the past. Just looking at Dragon Age Inquisition, you will notice this is a complete downgrade from the things that we got in the past. Looking at this Morrigan that we see now, it looks like a Fortnite version of Morrigan, rather than the more deeply mysterious and intellectual version and an appealing and seductive design that we got in Inquisition and previous iterations of the game. So just seeing the design itself, I was highly disappointed in it. But I know people are going to say just focus on the gameplay and content, but when I look at the content that is being offered, it's clear that the people making this content don't understand Dragon Age. And how can I have confidence in the people that don't understand Dragon Age to make a good Dragon Age game? And I know you're gonna ask, how can they not understand Dragon Age? They're working at BioWare, they're developing the game, of course they understand Dragon Age. And if you know anything about the current day games developed, that's not the case for most games being developed nowadays. It's being developed by people that may hate video games, that may be consultancy firms that are just there to promote their own ideology rather than making a good game. And I think that's what we're seeing with the removal of the blood magic specialty from Dragon Age Veilguard, where they feel like it's not right for the game. They don't want their characters portrayed in this certain image, and it makes me think, oh, okay, why are they doing this? This has always been a class. You always had the right to be this way in this game. It was an option that I enjoyed doing, at least playing one playthrough as a blood magic specialist. That's the evil side, or the more aggressive side of the game that people enjoyed playing, and removing this class is showing that maybe they don't have the right intentions with Dragon Age overall, and they're more focused on making the game more oriented in what they're interested in, which is the romance options, which has always been a thing that people were focused on within the Dragon Age universe. So it's not anything out of ordinary. I think it's actually interesting to see him more focused on this, because this is a game that always had these options available and was one of the most key characteristics of the game that sells this game to the gamers and me myself. So I was looking forward to the romance options being available, but when you look at the options available, it seems very open-ended, but at the same time microscopic. I know what you're thinking. What are you talking about? It made all companions pansexual. You can go with any companion that you want. That should be the most diverse and open option every game player should want in a game. I'm like, no, that's the most limited option, because you just made every character one-dimensional. No character is complex anymore, at least when it comes to the romance options. They're more one-dimensional, more singular focus, and it's removing the depth of character that you can make if they had a specific gender option. And I think that's the thing that I'm looking at in this game, where I'm like, okay, these people really don't understand the character and perspective that you can build if a person is focused on one particular gender option. You can have one or two characters that are pansexual, but having every character that way just removes the three-dimensional depth of character that you can have if they had their own preferences and own ideals when it comes to these gender options. And I think this is kind of a one-dimensional take that they're having with this option, and I think it limits the scope of introspection and building of the characters that you can have when you offer many gender preferences for these characters. And people are gonna say pansexual is the ultimate option. I'm like, no, it kind of just eliminates all these other options where people can be straight, people can just be focused on male to male romance, people can just be focused on women to women, people can just be focused on bi or anything else option. I think you can have those preferences, and it offers a depth of character that you can see actually reflected in the real world. And I think that is the thing I would like to see, where it is offering this depth of character, but I think that is going to be absent if every companion is romanceable. And I think this is a flaw I saw even in Baldur's Gate 3, even though Baldur's Gate 3 was its own thing. I think this is a situation where I'm seeing, okay, this is a person that is refusing to see any gender preference besides the everybody preference. And I think that limits the scope of the character depth that you can have, because everyone is going to have the same preference, and it just makes everything bland and uninteresting. And I think that's what I liked about Dragon Age. The romance options weren't bland and uninteresting. I think this kind of pigeonholes it in that way, where it will become bland and uninteresting. I think this all goes back to the game director that is making the game. They themselves are gender queer, pansexual, queendom, whatever they want to call themselves on Twitter. They're the type of person that would enjoy this type of gameplay style, and I have no problem with that. But when it comes to servicing the story itself, I think this may be detrimental, and I think they're just thinking about their own personal proclivities over the story's sake. And I think that's a sad mind state to have when you're approaching a video game, where you just want to see yourself in the video game and you don't care about the story itself. That's why I go back and say it seems like these new game directors and game developers don't care about Dragon Age. They just care about themselves and seeing themselves in Dragon Age. You can see this with the game director Corinne Bush, who's an LGBTQ member that has their own preferences, and they call themselves the queer sexual gender mancer, and they have all these particular things represented on their page, and I have no problem with that. But it shows me there's going to be a limited scope in storytelling, because this person is more obsessed with themselves than actually developing a Dragon Age game. And I think that's the situation that we're seeing reflected back in the choices when it comes to the gender preferences of all the characters. It's just back down to the person that is game directing the game. They don't care about the game player. They care about themselves and seeing themselves in the game. And I think that's the situation where we get these character development arcs that are just not in line with what we want to see. And me, most of all, I just don't like the character designs. It just looks like something straight out of Fortnite. I know people are trying to praise this, saying this is some grand design, new look for Dragon Age. This is something we'll all love. But when I look at some of these new designs in comparison of the old designs, it just doesn't look like something I want to see or play. Just looking at some of these character designs compared to the old ones that we saw just in Dragon Age Inquisition, which I think had the best character designs, these people look real beautiful, engaging, attractive, and unique. And I don't think the new character designs actually have that. I feel like it goes back to the new modern design trope of making every character more grounded, more realistic, more unattractive, and more unappealing. And I think we see that reflected back in this new Dragon Age Veilguard. But this is just my opinion on the situation. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think Morrigan looks absolutely stunning in this new version, but just looking at her clothes, it feels like someone that doesn't even know design of clothes is making these characters as well. It just feels like this is a cheap knockoff of what we saw before, which was absolutely stellar. And I think this is reflecting back on the game itself, where I'm noticing these flaws that are clearly apparent in the trailer. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you think these are not flaws. These are the ideal type of designs for the game that you believe Dragon Age deserves. Maybe I'm wrong. You tell me. You leave a comments. Tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.